Just doing that on the last one with the questions that the audience puts up, because that's how you did it the last one.
No, actually, if anyone says anything about me by name, or it's obvious who nice. Just wait until the end when it's either your turn or everybody's had their turn for that question.
All right.
Okay, let's begin. Thank you for joining us tonight in experiencing this democratic process and discussion. My name is Starla Rice, and I am the forum moderator tonight. This forum has been organized by an ad hoc Hot Springs Citizens Committee who believe that public participation is a prerequisite for good governance. We are here to learn about the candidates so that each of us can do our civic duty before November 7th and vote for the 2018 government of Hot Springs. Tonight we meet 4 city council candidates for what are just 2 seats. Susan Roberts, Paul Stelter, Nina Costner, and Leslee Smith. The top 2 with the majority of votes will win. You have received a program outlining how tonight's forum will proceed. Please understand that this time focuses on the city council election. We begin with each candidate giving a 2-minute opening statement. We will then move into the formal questions, rotating who gets each question. So it's not going to be the same order every time. The candidates will have 1 minute to answer. If any candidate refers to another by name, the named candidate will be given 30 seconds to rebut should they wish. At the end of the formal questions, each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. In order to make the best use of the time, our timekeeper will buzz when time is up. We request each candidate show respect by simply finishing their sentence when their time is up. Please don't make Maura use the cane. We will have a 10-minute break after each candidate gives their closing statement before moving into questions from the audience. Please write your questions on a blank card and place it in the basket by the door prior to the break's ending. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, ending at 9 p.m. Coffee, tea, and cookies are also offered to you. Please limit your moving around during the program as much as possible once it gets underway. Restrooms are accessed by walking down the hall over there to the left of the candidates' table. The kitchen area of the building is closed throughout the evening. And we thank the Tribal Nutrition Center for renting us this space for this very important program. We hope that you enjoy the program.
Starla, I'm going to ask one. Last time people said they had a hard time hearing, so if the candidates can remember to speak towards the audience and project. Thank you.
First question, Paul. What do you see as... Oh, opening statements, yes. We'll just jump to it.
Well, I'm sitting here because I love this town. I'm here because I want to serve this town. I feel that this town has so much to offer and is a place that I want to see the citizens grow and be loving and kind towards each other and work together and communicate with each other. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm sitting in this chair tonight, because I love this town.
Okay, I'm Leslee Smith. I moved here in 1996 and fell in love with the old historic Suns Hotel. I was born in Seattle, Washington. My mom is a Montana native. She was born in Belt and raised in Augusta. I have a lot of cousins in the state. I've been in public service since the day I got out of the car. Donna Redmond said to me as I was standing on the deck, "Can you work a shift at the concession booth at the fair, please?" And I said, can I take my coat off first, you know? I've been the president of the Hot Springs Chamber of Commerce. I've been the vice president of the Hot Springs Artist Society. I've been on the Glacier Country Tourism Board for 12 years and was termed out with a nice legacy plaque. I'm really interested in seeing that Hot Springs is a very kind place, like Paul said. I want all of our neighbors to get together. I think that in reality, we do all get along, and the government is, it's important because hopefully we'll experience a little growth with the bathhouse reopening. And I'd like to see this authentic Western town lovingly restored.
Hi, thank you everyone for coming. I'm Susan Roberts. I moved here 22 years ago to a cottage at Alameda's. That man up on the wall there in the Santa suit, silver tip, who's wearing the necklace with the grizzly bear claws, was my neighbor. Christmas Eve, he brought me a box of commodities, and I knew I'd come home. Soon after, I created the Hot Springs Artist Society and partnered up with Leslee and Dan Smith to bring culture to Hot Springs. The town of Hot Springs was a little leery at first. They were afraid we were going to destroy everything. But we made the front page of the Missoulian as a renaissance. We were in the Independent as the new wave of culture in Montana. In 1999, I moved to Phillipsburg, Montana, and became editor of the second oldest newspaper in Montana. I garnered personal awards as a reporter and awards for freedom of information for the Phillipsburg Mail. I moved to Anaconda and became community service coordinator for the Consolidated City County. I worked as their secretary for Parks and Rec, and I was temporary reporting secretary for the commission. I moved back here in 2008 because this is my home and I want it to be a healthy, prosperous place. That's why I'm running for council. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for attending. My family arrived in this country in 1632 from the Isle of Lewis off Great Britain's northwest shore, and I come from 4 generations of West Point graduates. Officers of the Revolutionary War received 10,000-acre land grants, and I had relatives at Harrisburg, Kentucky, the first settlement west of the Alleghenies. My family land bordered the Lincoln family land near Springfield, Kentucky, and I grew up sleeping in a solid cherry 4-poster bed made by Lincoln's father and uncle. My sister is a vice president of Google and currently runs Twitter. Talk about connections. I was born in Tampa, Florida, and was a camp kid growing up. Realizing camping was my very favorite thing in life, I made a lifestyle out of it, living very rurally off the grid for many years as an adult. I have lived all over this fine country, making Hot Springs my home 15 years ago. I have worked for most of the businesses in town at one time or another, but prefer working mostly for myself at a variety of things. I have several trades I have mastered, and I have worked for many individuals here in town, including some of you here tonight. I grow most of my own food, canning and freezing as the opportunity allows. I have vast experience networking and have many contacts from the Flathead to the Bitterroot and beyond. I am here to help us navigate as we enter uncharted waters in these uncertain times. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, we will begin with questions. Paul, what do you see as your role as a member of the council?
Serve the people, to allow the town to grow on a good path so that it continues having all the amazing services and businesses that it has now. I want to work to maintain those businesses, the strength of this town, and to maintain the services that are available to the people of this town. Again, my love for this town is in service to what the people want, and I want to be able to be in this position to do the right thing. Thank you.
Leslie, what do you see as your role as a member of the council?
Well, as a member of the council, I would like to see through the infrastructure projects that we started in the last year or so, which is this sewer redevelopment and also the third phase of the water infrastructure. I have attended all of the budget meetings. I would like to look at the budget with a concerned eye and make sure that and ask questions to make sure we're doing the best we can with the money that's given to us. I also am participating now and would continue to participate in ordinance review and zoning review. And I like to work with everybody. I like to think with an open mind. And when we review the zoning, we'll be looking at some things that several years ago we put in place that maybe we will reverse.
Good timing.
Susan, what do you see as your role as a member of the council?
Water is life. No one would be in this room today, historically, if it wasn't for the water. The big medicine water, the water we drink. I want good governance. I want predictable, open policy making. I want professional authority acting in the furtherance of the public good. Rule of law. Rule of law is the most important. Hot Springs believes that we've always done it this way, but they're not doing it by the rule of law. That's what I want. Thank you.
Nina, what do you see as your role as a member of the council?
I see myself as a bridge between the administration and the community, helping to make for better communication. I see myself as sort of an ambassador to, just like when you're bartending, you have problems arising and an astute bartender can diffuse those problems before it comes to blows. And an astute ambassador, city council person could potentially alleviate problems between neighbors before it gets to the police. I won't be making promises I can't keep, but I will familiarize myself with the closer workings of the town and promise to operate with integrity, responsiveness, and follow-through. I have a long history of community involvement and will bring that enthusiasm and new ideas to the table.
Leslie, what do you consider the most critical municipal problems and how would you address?
Well, I think communication is probably one of our largest problems, and I really think we have 2 new counselors on the council, and so there's kind of a learning curve. When you come in new, you have to learn the workings of the budget and what all of those acronyms are, and also familiarize yourself with the ordinances. And I think that the audience needs to be able to participate and ask questions, because they don't really know everything that we're working on at the same time. And I believe that we are changing the agenda to include more audience participation.
Susan, what do you consider the most critical municipal problems and how would you address?
The Montana Local Government Center in Bozeman cited the fact that between 2009 and 2013, the general appropriation for the town has gone up 92.5%. That should mean that we should have more services. But in the local government study survey, people were very concerned about the status of the streets and the police department. Those are things that I think need to be dealt with, because according to a letter by the mayor to the budget attached to the state budget. 57% of the budget is going to police. When people feel like the police are not there, these need to be addressed.
Nina, what do you consider the most critical municipal problems and how would you address?
Many of the municipal problems I would have to more familiarize myself with, but one thing we may not be paying attention to is our mental health office is closed recently. There are probably 50 people, which is about 10% of our population, that rely on that. And so paying attention to that and having, as Susan mentioned, a more responsive police. I hear that a lot, that we are paying a lot and there are questions about that I don't necessarily have answers for, but
Paul, what do you consider the most critical municipal problems and how would you address?
Well, I think that the biggest problems we have is maintaining what we have. Always coming up with just enough money to make sure that we are offering the services and the services that we have in this town. If we don't continue to do that, if we don't continue to find funding, then we're in trouble. We have always stayed ahead of the curve as far as I can see, as far as the water projects and the sewer projects, because I do feel that economic times are going to be dictating real soon that the monies that we can get for these projects are not going to be there anymore. So it's just staying ahead of the game is so important at this time. I think another problem that we see, or I've seen in the last councils, is a respect for the council members themselves and the members on the council respect towards the audience or the citizens. I think that has got to really grow, because I think that's the crux of so many problems we have.
Susan, the city council is responsible for setting the town budget. Currently, the police department budget consumes over 50%. What is your vision for an ideal police department in Hot Springs?
I don't have a clue. I think the people of Hot Springs need to take a good look at that. The council would have to maybe do some surveys and talk to people about what they want. It's all about the people of Hot Springs. It's not about who's running the administration. I would be interested in seeing what people want. When I first moved here, one officer. Most of the time I lived here, one officer, tribal backup. I don't know. It's a big problem. We need to look at it. Thank you.
Nina, the city council is responsible for setting the town budget. Currently, the police department budget consumes over 50%. What is your vision for an ideal police department in Hot Springs?
well, one thing I advocate is a return to community service for especially our at-risk youth. When I mentioned this before in the past, it was asked who would supervise and manage this. As your city council person, I will take this on. I have extensive experience working with kids and at-risk youth. I have nonviolent conflict resolution training, and I am enrolled to become a Say It Straight certified counselor. There's nothing like a hard day's work to make one sleep well at night, and we could have our more skilled city workers focused on those moving targets, while things like mowing and perhaps painting could happen through this program. And possibly we could have some turnaround with our youth. We could also utilize this program to aid in some city beautification projects. Thank you.
Paul, the city council is responsible for setting the town budget. Currently, the police department budget consumes over 50%. What is your vision for an ideal police department in Hot Springs?
Pretty much what Susan said in some ways. I remember a few years ago we had a meeting and there wasn't enough police protection and we needed to have more police. And a few years later you hear from the people that we want less police. It's dynamic and it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard right now because our whole country is under this fear. It's constant fear. We're constantly making more and more military, more and more police to protect us. I really don't know what the answer is. It's just such a tough one. It's really one that I don't think that you can get the total right answer for everybody. It's going to be too much for some people and not enough for others. I don't really have an answer at this time, and I don't know that I ever will, because it changes too much.
Leslee, the City Council is responsible for setting the town budget. Currently, the police department budget consumes over 50%. What is your vision for an ideal police department in Hot Springs?
Well, I think that that issue has been changing. It's not a static situation. We lost Chad, resigned. We have Stu in as the police chief. We only have 120 hours a week that we can pay for, and that does not cover the town every day, all day, and in the evenings. And right now, I feel we have the best police force we've had in a long time, and our new officer, Logan, has been diligent about actually stopping some of the crime that happens in the middle of the night. And I personally, when I need a police officer, I need him right now. I had someone shoot a gun right through the wall of cabin R3 and left pellets all in the wall. Gun violence is high. I think that's all we can afford right now, and really, it's just enough, in my opinion.
Nina, Montana has very stringent open meeting laws enshrined in our Montana State Constitution to ensure public participation and right to know in government. What circumstances do you believe justify having a closed official meeting?
Only where personnel and their privacy is being discussed in order to take an action before that action's taken. Otherwise, or if we're discussing a liability like a lawsuit or something. But again, that's privacy laws are being respected. Other than that, I fully advocate open meetings and plenty of notice everywhere.
Paul, Montana has very stringent open meeting laws enshrined in our Montana State Constitution to ensure public participation and right to know in government. What circumstances do you believe justify having a closed official meeting?
I'm in agreement with Nina. The only time that I can see having a closed meeting is personnel problems and having to deal with lawsuits. I think those are only times that really you should have a closed meeting. Otherwise, have the meeting as open as you can to everybody in the town to make sure that they're knowing what's going on with our government. And it's one of the things that I've noticed in the past years is Steve, and before Steve was Tina, I believe, who were always filming the meetings so that everyone knew what was going on. It was been a big step, and I just think that continuing to keep an open communication with the public is the most important thing that we can do it.
Leslee, Montana has very stringent open meeting laws enshrined in our Montana State Constitution to ensure public participation and right to know in government. What circumstances do you believe justify having a closed official meeting?
Well, I agree with Paul. The only reason that we ever go into executive session and have a closed meeting is if we have legal issues, lawsuits, and if we have employee issues. And otherwise, all of our meetings are open. Ordinance review is open, budget meetings are open, all of our city council meetings are open. I don't believe in backdoor decision making, and I like to see all of our meetings are completely open to the public.
Susan, Montana has very stringent open meeting laws enshrined in our Montana State Constitution to ensure public participation and right to know in government. What circumstances do you believe justify having a closed official meeting?
By law, only personnel issues and legal.
Paul, what does transparency in government mean to you?
Total disclosure. again, I think that it's the same thing we were talking about with the open meetings, letting people know exactly what's going on and speaking the truth. I mean, it's the only way you can deal with any kind of communication is speaking the truth.
Leslee, what does transparency in government mean to you?
All of our meetings are open to the public. We welcome public participation, and Stephen videotaping all of our sessions, and even these sessions now, shows a great deal of transparency for our town.
Susan, what does transparency in government mean to you?
My experience comes from being a journalist and reporting on city council meetings, commissioner meetings, school board meetings, hospital board meetings. I've come up against that a lot because when I would report on the meetings, what I heard, I often was called on it because people really don't want transparency. Often they would like to keep it a little private. I'm a big advocate of transparency, and that means everything, all the laundry, everything out. And I will stick by that. Budgets, personnel in terms of who's hired, how they're hired. The people of Hot Springs have a right to know everything about their government, everything except for personnel records.
Nina, what does transparency in government mean to you?
Transparency to me, including as well as the things the other candidates have spoken, includes things like follow through, returning phone calls, doing the homework to have an answer, even if the answer the person gets is not necessarily the one that they want to hear, but having somebody call back and have looked it up, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times, or sometimes it takes a long-winded constituent that you have to hold the space for. It's really important, especially our elder constituents that live here. They sometimes need to vent and to know that you have that ear and that you are going to look it up and find out what you can do for them or what you can't. And bringing this to the council, it would be my role, is being available to the town and then bringing it to the appropriate person within the town and seeing what could happen. And maybe that is not always going to be it may not be anything, but just the fact that people feel safe knowing that somebody's paying attention to their needs.
Leslee, what is your role as council in vetting new hires? How will you ensure the personnel policies and procedures are being followed as to conflicts of interest?
The mayor is in charge of hiring all of the employees for the city, but he has asked the council to sit in and to interview potential employees, and we actually then vote for the employee, or for the new hire. We have a handbook. It's been gone over by numerous people in human resources, and that was done in the last year, in 2016. And other than that, that's kind of the mayor's job, and he brings it up to, if there are issues, he brings it up to us in an executive session.
Susan, what is your role as council in vetting new hires? How will you ensure the personnel policies and procedures are being followed as to conflicts of interest?
If I get elected to the council, I have every intention of making it a council-mayor form of government instead of a strong mayor government. I believe that the council needs to be more involved in the entire process of the town, and that includes who's hired. There have been too many times when there has been hints of nepotism in Hot Springs. It happens in all small communities, and I will make sure it doesn't happen here anymore. Thank you.
Nina, what is your role as council in vetting new hires? How will you ensure the personnel policies and procedures are being followed as to conflicts of interest?
I'm big on checking references and looking back at past employment, finding out why they left there, why maybe they weren't given a raise or a higher level that, moved up, if they were passed over. Sometimes it's good to look back a couple times through a couple of different employers to find out why are they here. Sometimes they like a small town, sometimes they've been passed over a couple times, or they have black marks on their record. And so I thoroughly believe in checking references and looking thoroughly at any employee's past before we hire them.
Paul, what is your role as counsel in vetting new hires? How will you ensure that personnel policies and procedures are being followed as to conflicts of interest?
Well, ultimately, the mayor does have that decision, and it is brought before the council to listen to their recommendations. I'm agreeing with Nina, checking out references, making sure that they're qualified for the job that they're asking to be received on. And I think it's important we try to hire as much as we can locally. I think we've done a pretty good job. We're real limited in a lot of skills that sometimes we have to hire out of the area. But mostly if we can hire locally and get good people here in this community working, that's what I'd like to see.
Since my name was mentioned, can I add something? I don't necessarily want to rebut, but I think that we, as a town, could maybe look into some incentive programs to offer maybe young family, whether it's police or town workers, to come from Billings, Great Falls, or Bozeman, there are types of incentive programs that we could offer them to be able to make it affordable, where a young family might come here and invest and plan on staying a longer time.
Susan, in our commissioner executive form of government, the council creates policy and the mayor has administrative power to implement those policies. If the mayor departs from the council policies, explain how will you assert corrective action?
Montana Code annotated, every time. I go to the law. It's easy to access. Council's been called on it twice in the last couple months and has paid no attention. I won't just ask for the law to be enforced, I will demand it.
Can I ask something? Are we going to be allowed to follow up on our own statements? Or are we going to stay with the format, or are we going to be able to just, I forgot to say this and I want to say this time?
Sorry.
Closing. Yeah. Do it at closing.
Okay.
Nina, in our commissioner executive form of government, the council creates policy and the mayor has administrative power to implement those policies. If the mayor departs from the council policies, explain how will you assert corrective action?
I'm consulting our lawyer and the Montana Code annotated. We have to follow the law. It's pretty black and white. I would have to learn to what the procedure would be to ask for clarification or how you would correct. That I'm sure there's a procedure for that.
Paul, in our commissioner executive form of government, the council creates policy and the mayor has administrative power to implement those policies. If the mayor departs from the council policies, explain how will you assert corrective action?
I'm in agreement. You follow the law, consult with your town attorney, find the right path.
Leslie, in our commissioner executive form of government, the council creates policy and the mayor has administrative power to implement those policies. If the mayor departs from the council policies, explain how will you assert corrective action?
Well, I would need to know what the specific instance was, because in my experience on the council is committed to enforcing the ordinances, and so is the mayor. And I guess we go into council discussion. If the mayor has a suggestion or something, the council all discusses it, and then we act on it. And of course, we're not going to do anything that's illegal.
Rebuttal. Recently, the council it was pointed out to them that they could not enforce ordinances after 1 year after by the statute of limitations. They did not follow that law. Thank you.
Nina, how will you prevent selective enforcement of ordinances?
Well, most of these, it depends on which ordinances you're speaking about, but many of because our town has so many different times when homes were constructed, we had different administrations, and so it's askew. As I understand, we have different markers where the different sections and additions of the town were plotted off of. So the surveys are inconsistent from one side of the town to another. And so I feel like we have to take a case-by-case basis, but we have to look at that selectiveness. We hear a lot of references to Mayberry, and Mayberry didn't have gentrification, and Mayberry took care of Otis, and Mayberry comforted the weak and had good communication. And if we want Mayberry, we have to not have it be elitist in some ways.
Paul, how will you prevent selective enforcement of ordinances?
Well, I think the first thing is to review the ordinance and make sure that they're ordinances that can be enforced. It's been a constant problem with the city, is finding a way to enforce the ordinances. So many of them are said, well, you know, this person is getting special treatment and this person is getting special treatment. And it's so much of the time, it's just that the ordinance itself is unenforceable. The language might not be proper, or it's just something that might even be outdated. So I think that the ordinances have to constantly be reviewed, and once they're intact, they have to be enforced. That's what they're there for.
Leslie, how will you prevent selective enforcement of ordinances?
Well, it says in MCA that the ordinances are to be reviewed by the council every 3 to 5 years, and we're in that time period again where we are going to go through the ordinances. That does include zoning as well, and we have found that, well, for instance, the Decay Ordinance has been a big issue in the city, and it's really hard to enforce because if it's not a health or a safety issue, then we do it by complaint. And we've had a lot of public outrage about the Decay Ordinance. So that needs to be reviewed and clarified so we can enforce it.
Susan, how will you prevent selective enforcement of ordinances?
Statute of limitations. The period prescribed for the commencement of an action by a municipal corporation for the violation of a city or town ordinance is within 1 year. 1 year only, period. Nina's fence was 8 years old. It should have never come before the council. It's a done deal. Zip, zero, over. That's what needs to happen. If it's not within 1 year of a violation of the ordinance, you can't enforce, period.
Paul, what is your role as council in vetting and overseeing new contract hires?
Give it to me again.
What is your role as council in vetting and overseeing new contract hires?
We're talking about someone that has a plumbing problem in City Hall or something like that. I'm not sure what you're trying to ask me on this.
Clarification?
Say the question again, I was responding to the question here.
What is your role as council in vetting and overseeing new contract hires?
It would be kind of the same thing as hired personnel, but these are contractors. What role does the council play in reviewing contracts, deciding who gets the contract, and so on?
Well, in the past, we really haven't unless it's gone to bid where we have to look at it. My policy is always to try to get people locally as much as possible. Keep the people here working. If they're not qualified, to find somebody outside of town. And that's how I look at it.
Leslie, what is your role as council in vetting and overseeing new contract hires?
A good, for instance, on that is going to be we're going to be going out to bid for the sewer project in January. It's actually part of the engineer's job to vet those people that come in, and then they're also interviewed, and the council does have final say on who we hire for outside contracting. If it's a plumbing issue and we don't have a backhoe in our machinery inventory, then we leave it up to the mayor.
Susan, what is your role as council in vetting and overseeing new contract hires?
I want to see the council more involved. I don't believe the mayor should have the ability to be vetting those contracts and then presenting them to the council. I think the council should be involved.
Nina, what is your role as council in vetting and overseeing new contract hires?
Well, once again, I would say checking references and looking back and calling old towns or municipalities or other customers of these contractors and asking if they were satisfied with the work that was done. I know that when the city water project happened in 2003, and when I first moved here, a lot of the meters didn't work. They were pretty faulty right off the bat. They were supposed to be drive up and do from your car, and before we even started paying for them, I may not be 100% accurate here, but pretty closely we were having faulty meters. And so for me, that contractor would not be hired again, and I would make something that would follow their record, like they had the Better Business Bureau, so that other towns might not get substandard equipment in their bids.
Leslie, at last week's forum, Randy stated that a review of the town ordinances is currently being conducted. As the mayor and 2 council seats are currently up for election, which could change the policy focus, do you support this action? Why or why not?
Would you say that again, please?
At last week's forum, Randy stated that a review of the town ordinances is currently being conducted. As the mayor and 2 council seats are currently up for election, which could change the policy focus, do you still support the town ordinances the town ordinances review being conducted? And why or why not?
Well, I think it's more important than ever. If we had 2 different council persons and a new mayor, they'd have to familiarize themselves with the ordinances, because they may or may not be familiarized with the ordinances. And so it says in the MCA they're to be reviewed every 3 to 5 years. I think it's really important that every council person educates themselves about the ordinances, because those are the laws of the town, and we are the legislators for the town.
Susan, at last week's forum, Randy stated that a review of the town ordinances is currently being conducted. As the mayor and 2 council seats are currently up for election, which could change the policy focus, do you still support this action? Why or why not?
I certainly hope they're keeping minutes, because they didn't on the last 57 that were codified, which is against the law, and they should have been thrown out. Since the Woods administration, there have been 107 ordinances reviewed and renewed. Do we need to keep adding to this book that is now this deep for a town of 461 people? No, I do not support the idea of a codification at this time. I think it should be postponed.
Nina, at last week's forum, Randy stated that a review of the town ordinances is currently being conducted. As the mayor and 2 council seats are currently up for election, which could change the policy focus, do you support this action? Why or why not?
I do support it being reviewed. Some of the ordinances are pretty askew. The fencing ordinance talks about that only fences can be 6 foot tall when we have lots of 8-foot deer fences around. And the fencing ordinance also wants to have only 4-foot fences in the front of the house so that there can be police and community surveillance. That's kind of scary language, but they're they're askew because they're not correct with how things are all over, as I mentioned earlier. When I bought my home in 2002, I spent time down at City Hall reading the ordinance book and familiarizing myself with it. I have taken on the growth policy. I have a copy of it, not the amended version, and it's been a couple of years. I had a house fire 7 years ago. It's taken a lot of my time. But I have taken the time to go in and sit and get copies of these ordinance books to familiarize myself with the language. Thank you.
Paul, at last week's forum, Randy stated that a review of the town ordinances is currently being conducted. As the mayor and 2 council seats are currently up for election, which could change the policy focus, do you support this action? Why or why not?
Well, I think the current members, they've got 4 years of experience behind them. I think that adds a lot when you're doing the ordinance review. So I think that we should continue going ahead with the ordinance review. And I think that maybe we should look at reviewing ordinances as needed also. I think that was the whole idea of the problem we had with the ordinance on people's yards, is that needed to be looked at again, and needed to be looked at right now, not in 3 to 5 years. So I think that maybe we need to take a look at ordinances maybe a little bit more as they come needed. But otherwise, I would say keep going with the process and have it an ongoing process.
Susan, do you believe the answer of "we're a small town" justifies the hiring of intimates and/or family members as employees when seeking to fill job openings? Please explain your answer.
No, I don't. I've seen nepotism in small places, numerous Phillipsburg, Anaconda. You see it everywhere. It's an excuse to give people jobs instead of doing what's right. I do not support it, and I would do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't happen.
Nina, do you believe the answer of "we're a small town" justifies the hiring of intimates and/or family members as employees when seeking to fill job openings? Please explain your answer.
I think this situation can be alleviated by wider advertising, longer advertising, and a longer period for interviews, and a slower, not making a decision so quickly. There are things that have to be, positions have to be filled immediately or quickly, but some we can afford to take a little time and think about it and do the reviews and interviews. And I think by widening the net, we will have more options.
Paul, do you believe the answer of "we're a small town" justifies the hiring of intimates and/or family members as employees when seeking to fill job openings? Please explain your answer.
Well, first of all, we are a small town. There is a lot of times a very limited amount of people for the jobs that we have available. My position is if they're qualified, I don't have a problem with it. It's who's ever the most qualified to make sure that we are having the services that are currently in good shape continue. I think it's important that we just hire the most qualified people, regardless of their relationships.
Leslie, do you believe the answer of "we're a small town" justifies the hiring of intimates and/or family members as employees when seeking to fill job openings? Please explain your answer.
Well, again, we are a small town, but in all of the major decision-making for employees that are in city government, we had applicants, and the city council interviewed all of the applicants, and we hired the most capable employee.
Nina, across the country, citizen apathy towards government has become pervasive. What would you do as an elected official on the council to inspire and include Hot Springs residents in our town government?
I believe in a bottom-up instead of a top-down government, and I believe in roundtable discussions and inclusiveness. I believe in creating different types of citizen advocacy groups and volunteer groups, and getting more people involved if they feel like that. If they feel like they have a stake in it, oftentimes they will get enthusiastic and become motivated to participate at higher levels. There are a lot of community activities, and I have a couple of ideas that I'll be bringing forth, whether I'm elected or not, that are town-wide, potentially money-making, and that would include the whole town, and the whole town would have to get behind it. And you'll have to wait till January to hear more about that, whether I win or not.
Paul, across the country, citizen apathy towards government has become pervasive. What would you do as an elected official on the council to inspire and include Hot Springs residents in our town government?
Listen. Just listen. Listen what people have to say. And try to find the truth in what they're saying.
Leslie, across the country, citizen apathy towards government has become pervasive. What would you do as an elected official on the council to inspire and include Hot Springs residents in our town government?
Well, I've seen apathy, I've seen no one in the audience, and I've seen everyone in the audience. So it just depends on how controversial the issues are that we're discussing at the time. But I think we've changed a lot at City Council. The audience has a lot more participation, and there's a lot more ability to ask questions and communicate and express their opinions. So I think we're doing a pretty good job of that.
Susan, across the country, citizen apathy towards government has become pervasive. What would you do as an elected official on the council to inspire and include Hot Springs residents in our town government?
People need to be included in the decision-making process. That's not what's happening. They're told this decision was made by the council and the mayor, and that's it. They're not asked what they want. Do you want a sewer project? Do you want your streets fixed? What do you want? I would ask them. I would go out of my way. If I had to walk down the street and do surveys, I would ask people, what do you want in your community? Let's do it. Thank you.
Okay, we will begin with closing statements. Paul, if you would begin.
Last time I had this thing, I didn't get to say this, and I really wanted to make this really clear that we are blessed living in this town. I have offered this to, I can't count how many people I've offered this to, the Alamedas, to find another community of 500 people or less, even up to 1,000, that has the services and the businesses that we have in this town. And no one has been able to do it. I've offered 3 nights. And I just want to be able in a position to maintain that for this community.
Leslie?
Well, I've been on the council for a couple of terms. I was on the planning board before that, and I also worked on the growth policy, the original one, not the amended one. I've worked tirelessly in the community to market and advertise the businesses here. I've been with the Hot Springs Chamber of Commerce trying to get more prosperity in our city here. We need a little bit of growth just so we can pay our bills, and we need to stay on top of our infrastructure projects. And I would like to be elected again so that I can see that through. and I think I have a lot of knowledge about the workings of the city government, and I still have a lot to contribute to the city and the people who live here. Thank you.
Susan?
I want to see the streets fixed. I want to see paint on the houses. I want to see the yards with flowers and vegetables in them. I want to see this place grow. I love this place. And why isn't it growing? Ask yourself, why isn't it growing? What's going on? Why isn't it? Why aren't people watering their lawns? Why aren't they growing huge vegetable gardens? We could be feeding the entire town with the amount of water we have here. Why aren't we? I want to see it change, and I will work tirelessly to make sure it does. Thank you.
Nina?
I have 40 years in the service and hospitality industry, which is essentially tourism, which plays a large part of our economy, all based around the water. I also have over 25 years experience working in group settings, building consensus, working with groups with differing viewpoints. I'm also part of an American-based international relief effort with a FEMA designation to mobilize when over 30,000 people are displaced. We are among the heavy hitters, like the Red Cross. We have been deployed to Hurricane Katrina, where I personally spent 10 days in the field, also Hurricane Sandy, flooding in Idaho, the earthquake in Haiti, stemming a cholera outbreak there last year, and there are kitchens in Texas and Florida now doing relief. We operate on a hive or pod system instead of a centralized location. In the event of an EMP, which was mentioned last week, and if the diesel ran out, we are prepared to offer filter water and a gravity-fed system with 0.05 micron filters. I personally have the skills and experience to facilitate feeding and providing clean drinking water for this entire town in such an event. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break. Okay, we're ready to begin as soon as the timekeeper is back.
Oh, I continue doing that. Should we start off before you get started? I have a statement to make. I don't have a question, but a statement. I have a statement everybody gets to hear. Oh yeah, statement everybody gets to hear. And that is this. Susan Roberts, you owe everybody in this town an apology for misappropriating public funds for your personal gain while running the Government Study Commission. And anytime you would like to have a wide open forum to discuss this, I would welcome the opportunity. And again, I don't make statements I can't back up by current Montana law. I never do so. You're welcome. Not personal attack. Not personal attack.
I was elected and did what I was supposed to do.
Elected paid.
Okay, this question is actually to all the candidates. By ordinance, just speak up if it's true of your situation. By ordinance, the position of council member is limited to those who reside inside the town limits of Hot Springs. Do any of the candidates own property outside town limits within 6 miles? If yes, how often have you slept there in the past month or past year? Does anybody wish to speak to that?
I'll be happy to speak to that. I do own a ranch on the backside of Wild Horse, and I actually rented out my cabin because I can't sleep there. I'm busy sign sitting, and I live 2 blocks up the hill on 2nd Avenue North, and I'm just happy to be inside the town limits, yeah.
Does anybody else wish to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. I have property outside of town. I spend most nights there. It's a place for me to escape from Alameda's. I'm usually at Alameda's from 8 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. And I take all my meals there. The little place I have is basically a place that I have been working on writing a book for the last 3 years. And that's my space for escaping, and that's what that little space is for.
Anybody else?
No, I own 40 acres of land in northern Arizona. That's farther than 6 miles away.
All right, next.
I live in a cottage on A Street, and state law is very specific in stating that one address and one address only for purposes of election and voting. It is a fact that the town council appointed Mr. Stelter and then circulated a rumor which stated that if he stayed at Alameda's 3 nights a week, that it would be legal. In talking to an attorney in Helena, he told me that is not correct. There is no such law, and that Mr. Stelter either lives in the county or he lives at Alameda's, but he can't go back and forth. Thank you.
Can I rebuttal on that? I'll rebuttal on that. I am also a shareholder at Alameda's, and that is my place of residence. That's where I live.
I have photographs that prove that that's not true. Thank you.
Okay, are we done with this question, candidates? All right, let's move on. Paul, earlier this year, the Hot Springs Council dealt with the makeup of a proposed planning board. Would you favor a planning board that has more members from outside the town limits in the county? Or do you favor a planning board where a majority of the members are residents that live in the town of Hot Springs?
If I'm not mistaken, we were designated a city-county planning board. I think that's how it was set up. So, and I can't remember what was the proportion. It was 4 out of town, 5 city. Does anyone, Randy, do you know what that is, Leslie?
No,
Do you remember
but
what the numbers were?
They were, each member was specific to how they were appointed. I forget.
Okay. I would think that most of the people should be in town, though. I would say the majority of the people on the planning board should be in town because those the ordinances are dealing with people in town. But I do believe the county has to have representation on the planning board.
Leslie, earlier this year, the Hot Springs Council dealt with the makeup of a proposed planning board. Would you favor a planning board that has more members from outside the town limits? Or do you favor a planning board where a majority of members are residents that live in the town of Hot Springs?
I was the one who made the motion on the city planning board, and then we had overwhelming response from people who live just outside the city limits, but did all their business inside the city limits. And so we redid our motion to do a city-county planning board, and whatever that makeup is, I agree with that.
Susan, earlier this year, the Hot Springs Council dealt with the makeup of a proposed planning board. Would you favor a planning board that has more members from outside the town limits? Or do you favor a planning board where a majority of the members are residents that live in the town of Hot Springs?
I think the people of Hot Springs should decide whether they want a planning board. And if they want a city-county planning board, it has to go through the commissioners of the county first. And then it's listed in law who is supposed to be on it.
Nina, earlier this year, the Hot Springs City Council dealt with the makeup of a proposed planning board. Would you favor a planning board that has more members from outside the town limits? Or do you favor a planning board where a majority of the members are residents that live in the town of Hot Springs?
We know that our water-based tourism is the source of our economy, but to not realize that the ranchers in the greater Hot Springs community are our bread and butter is naive and short-sighted. While I do believe that the majority of the members on a planning board, should we have one, should be from within the town, because the law states, I believe, that only people in the town can vote. to not include our neighbors in the greater community is exclusive. And those folks shop here, they come here, they spend their money here. Most of the business owners are owned by people that live outside of town, and to not include them in the discussion is setting ourselves up for problems.
Leslie, what do you think would be a good policy or ordinance for cleaning up old car parts and salvage from yards in Hot Springs?
Wow, that's the Decay Ordinance. That's the burning issue, literally. There have been some locations in town that have been grandfathered in over the years. Their business is being run in a residential zone. And, you know, I just think the whole thing needs to be looked at again, and that's what we're doing. And we want to create ordinances that are enforceable.
Susan, what do you think would be a good policy or ordinance for cleaning up old car parts and salvage from yards in Hot Springs?
Well, you're talking about private property. I would rather spend my energy on beautification than on decay. Decay is part of life, it's what happens. And if somebody wants their property to decay, maybe that's their business. Thank you.
Several years ago, when our previous mayor, Renee, had to quit, I applied along with Randy to become the mayor. And at that time, one of the greatest issues facing us was our sewer problem, and we're still facing that. But what I suggested was about not getting, I'm not so much into grants, and that we should start raising money with bake sales and scrap metal drives and fundraisers. And the council politely chuckled at me, but that was before we built this clinic on scrap metal drives and fundraisers. Randy and the city's program of picking up stuff several times a year, it seems like it's been really successful. A lot of people have junk in their yards. They think they're going to reuse it. Maybe they're not. They get older, time gets away from them, they don't know what to do with it. They cover it over with something. And I think that the program that the city has implemented with the cleaning up, I've had some stuff hauled away I couldn't get in the back of a pickup truck. And the young guys came and hauled it away for me, very thankfully. Scrap metal's down right now, but I think that was a good program to continue.
Paul, what do you think would be a good policy or ordinance for cleaning up old car parts and salvage from yards in the Hot Springs?
Well, I think that exactly what Nina was saying, that the program of cleanup has really helped a lot. And I think once one neighbor starts cleaning up, then maybe the next one starts cleaning up also. And if we just keep pecking away at it, I think that's the easiest way to deal with it. So far, the ordinances, that's been a tough one. That's been a tough one where you want to try to enforce it, but it always seems to come back to bite you in some way. I think it's a slow process of continuing to present ourselves in the best light, and I think everyone will pitch in sooner or later. I do see a lot of things in people's yards that probably shouldn't be there, but then again, that is their property rights also. But I want to see us either enforce the ordinances or change the ordinances. But again, I think that the best way to do it is just through a slow process, very much like what we're doing with cleanup. And once one neighbor cleans up, hopefully the next one will follow suit, because you don't want their yard looking like a mess.
I would like to concur that the program that Randy Woods set up to haul stuff has been really helpful to the town. Not enough, we could use it more often, but it's good.
Susan, how do you support community garden projects and other local organic food initiatives?
I want people to get 5,000 gallons of free water with every hookup. I think that it's appropriate. Charlotte, 8,000 gallons before they start paying for it. Pablo, 5,000 gallons before they start paying for it. Big Fork, 5,000 before they start paying for it. Ronan, 3,000 before they start paying for water. That's the basic fee would give you 5,000 gallons to work with. For a family, that would be their basic needs. A sprinkling fee or an irrigation fee for people who want to do gardens. Thank you.
Nina, how will you support community garden projects and other local organic food initiatives?
Well, I helped briefly at the school garden, and I had joined the Parks and Recreation Board to help vocalize our parks. We have what I call the Tame Park here in town, and then we have the Wild Park out here in town. And I've actually met with Randy a couple of times and given him some of my ideas, but he's been so busy with his moving targets, we really haven't been able to address or move forward on that. But there's several things like, there's a National Wildlife Bird Sanctuary across the way, and I have many, many ideas too numerous to mention.
Paul, how will you support community garden projects and other local organic food initiatives?
I'm not really sure that is the place of government to be doing that. I know for ourselves at Alameda's, what we do is we raise foods for the food bank. And I know that there are countless trees in this town that could be gleaned that aren't being gleaned. And so much of that has to be from citizens' involvement and not coming from the government in order to make that thing happen. It's here, as I was saying, with the apples and the plums and the pears that are there that are just going and rotting right now. There's no reason for that, and it all comes down to the citizen involvement.
Leslie, how will you support community garden projects and other local organic food initiatives?
Well, I agree. It's really not a government entity, that dictates to the citizens about their gardening. I encourage gardening. I have a nice garden plot. I've been too busy. In 22 years, I haven't grown a garden. I certainly would let someone else garden there if they need a plot. I know some of my employees work tirelessly on gardens and really enjoy working with the kids in the school garden and other places. I've seen citizens recommend a community garden in the city park, the civilized city park, and have the youth till the gardens and everything. That was Sue Jeffries way back when I first moved to town. And I certainly support the permaculture programs that they've been putting on at the Towanda.
May I rebut? Actually, in Missoula does citywide community gardens on public property. My brother is the mayor pro tem in Frankfort, Kentucky. He researched, it's a bigger town of course, but he researched many public lots and converted them over to public access community gardens that work on a membership fee. And there are things that we could explore that way, whether someone wants to turn over and allow a garden. There's a lot of programs and grants available actually for providing garden space for the community.
Nina, do you believe the Board of Adjustments is no longer needed?
No, because, yes, No, that's a confusing question. I believe the Board of Adjustments is needed because we have so many properties with walls, rocks, trees, buildings, off-plats, and as we have many new people moving here, we are going to have to deal with this on a case-by-case basis. One place plotted, one not, how long it is, and I believe that the Board of Adjustments has the ability to look at these, look at the history, look at the usage of the property or what's necessary, and what is best for the community as a whole.
Paul, do you believe the Board of Adjustments is no longer needed?
Can't really agree more with Nina on what she just said. I do think that we do need it, and I think that it's something that helps on taking conflict out of community.
Leslie?
I agree, we do need a board of adjustments. The town over the years, it wasn't surveyed properly, and there are several places where there's trees in the right of way, there's overhangs on Main Street that encroach on city property. You have to take it on a case-by-case basis, and the Board of Adjustment makes recommendations to the city council, and then we vote on it.
Susan? Do you believe the Board of Adjustments is no longer needed?
Correct, I don't.
Paul, can you give us your background in finances, roads, water and sewer, and city government?
Well, city government, I was on the city council for 6 years. Well, give me the rest of the question.
Finances, background in finances, roads, water and sewer, and city government.
Well, as far as finances go, I would have to say it's my major weakness. I usually rely on other people to make those decisions because it's not one of my strengths. As far as infrastructure, I think I'm fairly strong on because of my background. I was born and raised on a farm. I've been in construction business for many, many years. And so I think that my expertise there is of value.
Leslie, can you give us your background in finances, roads, water and sewer, and city government?
Well, as far as finances go, I bought the Symes Hotel in 1996, and we're still alive and well. I remember when TJ poked his nose out the door and said, "Are you broke yet?" And I'm not broke yet, and I'm still been operating that hotel in the green for 22 years. I always volunteer to participate on the budget committee. We've had several town clerks, that they're a clerk treasurer, and a lot of it is done by computer, and it's very complicated, and it can be very confusing. It's done by different groups. For instance, the water is self-contained, and so is the sewer fund. They're different funds. But if you don't attend those budget committee meetings and ask questions, you won't know what's going on, and it's really important.
Susan, can you give us your background in finances, roads, water, sewer, and city government?
I've been studying the budget of Hot Springs since 2009, and I think we need a forensic audit. I think that too much money is being taken out of water and sewer. Those are enterprise funds, and they have massive debt. I think that as far as the infrastructure goes, we're putting Band-Aids on an archaic system of water and sewer. We need to go to new technology. Thank you.
Nina, can you give us your background in finances, roads, water and sewer, and city government?
I own 40 acres of land in northern Arizona and a home here that are both paid for. I'm a pay-as-you-go person, and I have never gotten a loan from a bank. I'm a very good saver. I also had to maintain 8 miles of road. The land is 8 miles off the blacktop. It takes 40 minutes to drive 8 miles in good weather. My husband and I at the time maintained 2.7 miles of that by ourselves. And then there's the 1 block of alley I've been building right here in Hot Springs for the last 15 years. I have good knowledge about water displacement, erosion, roads, and basic road building in general. I have been a roofer and a painter. I'm both retired from both of those things. I have several trades, so I understand building. I have worked as a coordinator at large-scale 3 to 5 day music events, hosting upwards of 30,000 attendees. I have supervised 20 to 30 folks on different crews, including promotion and marketing, parking, tickets and money, perimeter and security, fire watch, police and first aid, hospitality, which is backstage, cleanup and recycling. I also have a history of working fire and ambulance here in Hot Springs and the police as my years of bartending. Thank you.
Leslie, do Do you believe that a pre-existing sidewalk in the city right-of-way warrants a letter from the city or visit by the police chief as out of compliance with our ordinances?
Well, that's an odd question, but I can tell you that any sidewalks that were built that are in the city right away, we have an encroachment process for that. And same way with the overhangs on the main street that are actually in the city right away as well. And so we do have remedies for those older sidewalks.
Susan, do you believe that a pre-existing sidewalk in the city right-of-way warrants a letter from the city or visit by the police chief as out of compliance with our ordinances?
No.
Nina, do you believe that a pre-existing sidewalk in the city right-of-way warrants a letter from the city or visit by the police chief as out of compliance with our ordinances?
If the sidewalk is not obstructing traffic and it wouldn't cause damage to a vehicle, then no.
Paul, do you believe that a pre-existing sidewalk in the city right-of-way warrants a letter from the city or visit by the police chief as out of compliance with our ordinances?
It's the ordinance thing again. Again, it's just such a hard one because sometimes common sense doesn't correlate with ordinances. I have to think about it.
Susan, LHC was the contractor on a sewer project done here years ago. In spite of problems with their work, LHC was hired back for the water project. They claim recent problems with the water tank are not under warranty. Would you be in favor of legal recourse, i.e. lawsuit, to protect the taxpayer's investment this time?
Absolutely, I would be.
Nina?
Absolutely. If we had problems with our meters and our water project and now we're having problems with this tank, if there's negligence, then we owe it to this town to try to regain recompensation.
Paul?
I don't think the water meters were part of that, maybe they were. I would say, yeah, we'd have to take them legally if they're not performing the way they said they should, they would.
Leslie?
I agree. If they've done some bad work on the tank, then it needs to be addressed, and we would use a legal remedy as well, so.
Nina? Explain your understanding of why money from water or sewer cannot be used to fix streets.
It's my understanding that the water company has to run at a profit because of our grants, and that we have to have these these funds set aside for emergencies, and we have to maintain a certain percentage of our debt or our funds in a bank account for these emergencies or fluctuations, and they are allocated for just this one project. And so it's my understanding that the budget has different columns and the money has to kind of stay in them, and some of the general fund can be put in other, like putting fingers in dikes in emergency situations and things like that. I am not as familiar with the workings because I haven't been, other than looking at the budget, I haven't been able to really sit down and explore it like I will.
Paul, explain your understanding of why money from water or sewer cannot be used to fix streets.
I think Nina actually said it pretty well for not being on council. The account has to be maintained. You can't take money out of that account. It has to be maintained.
Leslie?
It's exactly the same as what Nina said. It's an enterprise fund that has to remain in that account, and we do have to put away a percentage of funds as part of our contract with the grant.
Susan, explain your understanding of why money from water or sewer cannot be used to fix streets.
According to enterprise accounting procedures, no money can be taken into the general fund for anything until the debt is paid, the bond debt. The town has been milking that fund and starving the calf, and a lot of that can be cut and should be. For instance, we should not be paying part of the lawyer's fees out of there because he does no work for the enterprise funds. It's very specific. It must be pertinent to that business fund. Thank you.
Leslie, Hot Springs has a decay ordinance. To enforce this ordinance, should there be a cleanup completion date and fine? What is your response?
Well, it has to pose a health or a safety issue, and there has to be a complaint from neighbors to, and then it goes to the police, and then there could be a fine imposed. But we just took imprisonment out of the ordinances, so they can no longer be imprisoned.
Susan, Hot Springs has a decay ordinance. To enforce this ordinance, should there be a cleanup completion date and fine? What is your response?
Well, the procedures are in the ordinance. They can take the issue to the council and ask for it to be reviewed. There's a number of things. It's not just that simple that you get fined and you pay it.
Nina, Hot Springs has a decay ordinance. To enforce this ordinance, should there be a cleanup completion date and fine? What is your response?
If a property is deteriorated to the point of being neglected to the point that it is a nuisance and there are complaints and the neighbors are being affected, different than somebody from across town, and it's an actual health and safety, then there are ways to address it in a friendly way, and if they don't want to work with the town and it is a real problem, then yes, there should be a time limit. And a real public nuisance could even possibly be facing recension or some other type of, there's several different ways the town could go about these situations, but we have very few of them that have real, sorry, that need that type of pursuing. Thank you.
Paul, Hot Springs has a decay ordinance. To enforce this ordinance, should there be a cleanup completion date and fine? What is your response?
Well, again, I think the ordinance has to be reviewed because the language is a little ambiguous. It has to be cleared up the language-wise. Once an ordinance is on the books, it should be enforced.
Rebuttal?
Yes.
All ordinances of Hot Springs have to conform with Montana law, and Montana law sets out the decay ordinance in statute. That's what you would follow in instances like this. The town can't make its own rules.
Anyone else?
If I'm not mistaken, rebuttal on that one. If I'm not mistaken, a town can have an ordinance that is more stringent than what Montana states, but cannot be less than.
That should go to the attorney for an opinion.
Okay, the final question actually is to Leslie, but anybody else that would like to speak to this or that this might apply to, please feel free to speak up. Leslie, what do you say to some people in this town who believe that you favor enforcement of zoning ordinances and the decay ordinance because you are a landlord who wants to be able to raise rents on your rental properties?
Well, I don't think it's anybody's business what I do with my rental properties. And I think I'm a very fair landlord, and I do the best I can. And I don't use any of the ordinance for my own personal gain. And I do want to say that in 2016, and with all new council people, we do sign a conflict of interest paper that's registered with the city.
Does anybody else have this particular conflict that they'd like to
State it again,
speak to?
please. State the question.
What do you say to some people in this town who believe that you favor enforcement of zoning ordinances and the Decay Ordinance because you are a landlord who wants to be able to raise rents on your rental properties?
I don't know what to say to that one. Okay.
That concludes our questions, unless anybody has a question that they would like to ask. We're ahead of schedule, so it doesn't hurt to offer. Anybody wish to ask a question?
I'd like to ask a question. Instead of a statement, a question. Now, Susan Roberts, you continue to talk about following the rule of law, following Montana Code Annotated, making sure that the rule of law is followed. And yet again, when you chaired the Government Study Commission, you did not follow the laws as you were trained to do. Consequently, I need to know why it is and when you're going to apologize to the citizens of this community for misappropriating public funds for personal gain, because that's what you did.
I suggest you file a complaint and take me to court, sweetie.
I suggest we have an open discussion.
Okay,
Hang around the corner.
this is a
Being around
civil
the bush now.
proceeding.
You don't want to admit it, that's fine. If you misappropriated public funds for personal
It's
gain,
becoming harassment.
that's it. Not harassment.
Does anybody have a question for the prospective council members?
I'd like to know if you guys all know what the roles are as a council member as it stands now before, what your roles are as council people. What is your job? You know, what exactly do you guys do?
Nina, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I got a thing for the paper that's going to come out tomorrow that I misunderstood one of the questions, and it asked about what power that would be granted, and I talked about, I answered it tongue-in-cheek. But here, it talks about in the ordinances, I asked somebody, because I'm a quick study and not afraid to ask people I don't know, ask about questions I don't know. So the powers of the council, it talks about, has the power to determine the rules of its proceedings, make and pass all ordinances, orders, and resolutions not repugnant to the Constitution of the United States or of the state, or of the provisions of state law necessary for the government or management of the affairs of the municipality for the execution of the powers vested in the body corporate by the state. Fix compensation for and prescribe the duties of all officers and other employees of the municipality, subject to the limitations set forth by the laws of Montana, 2-1. Require a report in detail from any officer of the municipality at any time regarding the transactions of his office or any matter connected therewith. Make any and all, it goes on and on, 2 or 3 more.
You can take my time.
Anybody else
Go ahead.
wish to?
Go ahead, I'm gonna let her.
Require a report, make any and all contracts necessary to carry into effect the powers granted by the laws of Montana and to provide for the manner of executing the same. Make regulations authorizing the police of the municipality to make arrests of persons charged with crime within the limits of the municipality and within 5 miles thereof and along the line of the water supply of the municipality. Impose fines and penalties for the violations of any municipal ordinance, but no fine or penalty shall exceed $500 and no imprisonment shall exceed 6 months for any one offense. Prior Code Section 2502. And then it goes on with the rules of the council. So take my tongue-in-cheek answer in the Baldy tomorrow as that.
I don't think there was enough space on it for that.
Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
I might each ask, do you want Hot Springs to grow with the amount of people coming here? And how do each of you feel like you welcome new people, new growth, people that come in and clean places up and want to make Hot Springs their home.
Who was that addressed to?
All four of you.
Oh,
Could you rephrase the question so it's a little simpler to answer?
Okay, now what did I say?
How would we welcome new people to
Okay,
the community?
How would you like
How do
for
you
Hot
want-
Springs to grow?
Okay.
What would you like to see? Would you like to see Hot Springs grow in people, and what is your feeling towards Hot Springs? How do you want Hot Springs to grow?
Yeah, how do you respond to people that want to come and make Hot Springs grow?
No, I would like to see it grow intelligently. I definitely don't want to see like what happened in the oil fields in North Dakota. I want it to be able to handle the services and pay for the services for the people that are moving here. I talk Hot Springs up all the time, and so I want people to move here that are going to bring something to the table to Hot Springs, for one thing. And I believe that this is a place to grow and have families, and yet do it in an intelligent manner, again, that doesn't stress out what we already have here.
Leslie?
Well, obviously, we've had a little tiny bit of growth over the last 22 years. When I moved to town, there were 411 people. Now there are 560. Not all of them are friends that I brought here. It is a retirement community somewhat, but we do have a wonderful school system, and we need to have enough young families to continue the school system and have students. The community with no school would be a very sad place. And I'm looking forward to the restoration of the bathhouse. I'm completely about historic restoration of the town as it was. It had many more people in the early 50s. It had 2 car dealerships, it had a movie theater, it had at least 8 hotels and motels. And agriculture is our #1 industry here, but #2 industry is tourism. I think our town welcomes tourism, unlike some other communities that don't want you to find your fishing hole. And I like to welcome everybody who comes to town, and it's entrepreneurs, small businesses. That's the way of the future.
Okay, Susan?
I very much like diversity and culture. When I started the Artist Society and we started bringing in cultural activities, there was a feeling of renaissance and people coming from different places to cultural events. We packed the lobby of the Symes with 80 to 100 people by just placing chairs, and we brought people from Ireland who played music. And Hot Springs has the potential to have that diversity of culture. Not just the homesteaders, just not the Native Americans, but the diversity of people. And I think when you have that, you are welcoming community. Thank you.
Nina?
Being from the South, folks welcome people, when they come into town, and I'm an unabashed promoter. There's a delightful newspaper article in the back that I spoke to a woman sitting at a homesteaders parade a couple of years ago, and she went home to Jessup, Georgia, and wrote a whole article about Hot Springs and mentioned me in it, and gives you a little feel for that. What I'm seeing are a lot of people moving here have the education and the aptitude to be making real money other places, and they've chosen to make this their home for a quality of life. And that's something that's essential for us to maintain, and intelligently and diversely. And I feel like that we have that capacity. We just have to figure out better ways to move forward together. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
I kind of like to add on to about the revamping of the bathhouse. A lot of people move to Hot Springs. I'm one of them because of the cheap rent, because Missoula has gotten so expensive. And some of the fears that they renovate the bathhouse, it's going to bring a lot more people in, it's going to bring people from other places, which will then start raising prices. So how do we balance that so the people who live here don't then have to keep moving on to the next cheaper place to live? Paul?
I don't know that you can find many cheaper places to live in Hot Springs. I mean, it's right now probably the least expensive place around that I know of to live, at least on the western part of the state. And I think the bathhouse, what it's going to do is just going to increase the business vitality in town more than anything else.
Leslie?
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, they were supposed to put the shovel in the dirt in June, and we haven't seen any construction yet. The tribe is very slow, but they did announce that they were going to restore the bathhouse. That's part of our history. At one point in the 50s, we had a larger population, somewhere around 1,000 residents. We need some new build homes in the area. Our young families can't find a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home or a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home. I applaud all of our community members that are taking the older stucco homes in the area. They're raising them up on foundations and improving them to create good rentals in the area. And I think that we have one of the lowest costs in the whole Northwest as far as cost of living goes.
Susan?
Historically and culturally, Hot Springs used to swell to 3,500 to 400,000 people in the winter. That's why you see all these little cottages, which is also a historic part of this town and should be reinvestigated. The tiny house thing is perfect for a lot of people. I don't believe people are going to necessarily move here to live here. They're going to come here as cultural tourists and stay. And so we need an infrastructure to be able to take care of that. Fred Symes was the person who got the ball rolling on that one.
Nina?
I feel like maintaining affordability is essential. I do feel like the bathhouse will add to the town because as Susan said, people will come here as cultural tourists. I would like to see it become easier for folks to open cottage industries at home, and there we could supplement our incomes, maintain it affordable, and yet we have a limited commercial area. So that's one way that we could maintain affordability. There are many, but I think with the small homes and the bathhouse will just create positivity, I believe.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
So water is one of our greatest assets here, but the thing that I don't hear as a priority to this town is our children, our young people, our teenagers. We have 2 centers where we feed our elderly a couple times a week. Bonus, that's a beautiful thing. But what is your guys' thoughts on how we can quit failing our younger people? We have had, several different organizations, community actions, and what is that? Where is that? Where is the safe place for our future to go to after school where they're not involved with drugs and the meth issue? Our kids are getting bored. We are failing our children here. End of story. What is your consideration as city council members and how we can bring our children up to the importance that our elders are and the ordinances and the streets?
Susan?
Pearl?
Yes.
Since I've been here, this has been an issue. 22 years it's been an issue. And it's never been addressed in a manner that made a pertinent show. these organizations are shooting themselves in the foot who are doing different things with the kids. They don't follow through. The Artist Society is one of them. The community center, there's no kids going up there now. Why? What's going on? We could be giving free swimming lessons to every kid in town. Why aren't we? That's what needs to be looked at, and it's not the council that can actually deal with that. It's the community, and the community can come to the local government and request assistance and pull people in, but people keep shooting themselves in the foot because people don't get along and they don't have good organizational skills or grant writing skills. Those things can be taken care of and dealt with.
Well, I'm inviting the city council, even though it's not your specific responsibility, to start bolstering and fostering the idea that these children need a place in our community. It's great to welcome young parents with no housing, but if their children are going to fail once they get here, then we're failing them.
Let's stick with the first question, and Nina.
It's unfortunate that the community awareness lost the tribal mandate, and therefore the funding went away. And there's a difference between power sharing and power over. Again, that's top down, moving from a pyramid to a circle. And I see the council's role as supporting the community in these efforts, but the council itself really doesn't have the power to they can support, but not necessarily sponsor these types of events or actions.
Paul?
I've been on the Hot Springs Community Awareness Board for quite a few years, through many of them. Believe it or not, I think one of the main issues that we've run into is continually the board is made up of 60 and 70-year-old people. I mean, it's most of the boards in the town. In some ways, we need to find the younger people to get involved. It is a sad thing because that's my whole life has been on kids. I coached swimming for 25 years. And I know that when kids and adults, when we don't have purpose, we're lost. And so we start looking for other things, and drugs are the most easy thing to find. It's a really tough question. It's really hard. I know that we tried keeping the center open for the longest time, and it just wasn't getting utilized. And a lot of it was communication problem, and a lot of it was energy of the board. Great ideas, but we only have so much energy. And the problem too with a lot of boards is the same people on all the boards, and pretty soon they're just doing everything. We really need to get the younger people involved in some way, and that's just a hard one. Yeah, my heart cries at times when I see what's happened to our kids in our town. There's so much here for them, and yet somehow it's not here for them.
Leslie?
I wish I knew the answer.
Leslie?
Well, again, the funding for the community awareness, it ran out. And really, Paul's right. He was on the board, and there was a lot of changeover on the board. Different people came in and different people left. But I have to say that we did give free swimming lessons in this summer at the Symes Hotel for those kids that were on the community awareness, and we had a certified teacher for them, and the school does bus the swimming students over to Polson to their new swimming pool over there. And that pool that was built at the Symes is a community pool, and we have a contract with the community for 25 years to provide free swimming lessons in the community. And so far, we have done that every year. And I know that the Head Start has started up, and it's a big plus for the community. A lot of young kids that are a little too young to go to kindergarten, they're going over there. That's pretty active, and that's going well. I really don't have the answer for the funding. So, you know, is it grant writing? I've seen us write grants for a couple of years and then the money runs out. So I don't really have any answers as part of the city council, but I would like to see more community involvement in seeing that the kids have a place to go. And I personally am buying all the hot dogs and cupcakes for the children's costume contest for Halloween up on Main Street, and I have done that every year. So, you know, it's up to the community individually to each one of us take a little part of it, and then we are making a difference.
All right. This ends our proceedings. Thank you, candidates, for coming. Thank you, audience, for your wonderful questions.